Photography is one of the best ways to document some of nature's most powerful storms. Modern camera technology allows us to freeze these incredible moments in time, allowing you to look back at these incredible tempests in remarkable detail. I've been photographing storms for the past 9 years, and throughout that time, I've learned a ton of tips and tricks that took my photos to the next level. In this video, I want to teach you all about where I like to position around storms and some photography tips that you can use to capture some stunning storm scenery. First off, and most important, you're going to need a camera. Cell phone cameras work alright, but to take my images to the next level, I like to use either a DSLR or a mirrorless camera. If you're looking for a camera and you're just starting out, I recommend the Nikon D3300. That's what I started out with, and I've used it to take some of my best storm photos. Also, the prices on it in recent years have come down quite a bit, so you won't be breaking the bank. I would also recommend picking up a good wide-angle lens. I have this 14 to 24mm lens, and I've found something in that focal length tends to work best. It'll also probably be best if you pick up a tripod if you don't want your images to be super blurry, or if you don't want your camera to blow away. If you want your images to look their best, I recommend you manually set all the exposure settings. If you already know how to do this, you can skip ahead in the video. If not, get ready for a brief crash course on how to manually set your camera settings. First off is your shutter speed. Shutter speed is how fast your shutter is open and exposing your image sensor to light. When my camera is on a tripod, I set my shutter speed to a longer duration, around 1/30th to 1 full second, maybe even longer depending on the time of day. If you're using a slow shutter speed like this, it'll be important that you set your camera on a timer or you use a remote. This will eliminate any motion blur from your images as you hit your camera's shutter button. Anytime my camera isn't on a tripod, I like to use a faster shutter speed. The faster your shutter speed, the less time your sensor will be exposed to light, and the less motion blur will build up in your images. I've found anything around 1/50th of a second or faster works best for my handheld photos. Next, we got your aperture. This is how much light your lens lets through to your image sensor. Larger apertures like f1.8 let in a ton of light and are great in dark situations. However, if you have a wider aperture like this, less of your image will be in focus. This is known as your depth of field. Smaller apertures like f8 or lower tend to be best in brighter situations, and you'll have a much larger depth of field, meaning more of your image will be in focus. Finally is your camera's ISO. This setting determines how sensitive your image sensor will be to light. Lower ISOs generally work the best as they produce the sharpest results. But if you're shooting a darker scene, you'll likely need to use a higher ISO. Beware that higher ISOs introduce more grain and noise into your images. Now that you've got your camera all figured out, let's head off towards a thunderstorm. Most chasers are out looking for a storm known as a supercell. These monsters have heavily rotating updrafts, and the wind-sheared environments they tend to thrive in often sculpts these tempests into dramatic shapes. Whenever I'm chasing a supercell, I always like to position myself in the clear air ahead of the storm's base. This base generally appears as a hook shape on radar, also known as a hook echo. This position often puts me in a perfect spot to capture the most dramatic images. But there is a catch. Positioning here can put me in the path of the most dangerous region of the storm. And if you choose to do this maneuver, you'll have to understand the risks you'll be facing and how to properly adjust if things go wrong. Once you're in a good position, it's time to pull out your camera and frame up your shot. I always try to avoid things like having power lines running through the middle of my images. And when I can, I like to use the roads to lead the way towards the storm. Also, placing things like buildings in the thirds of your frame can add a nice sense of scale to your images. With your shot all framed up, it's time to start shooting. I always prefer to set my camera on an intervalometer. This tells my camera to snap a photo after a certain amount of time has passed, which allows me to put all of my images into a time lapse, or I can edit them as individual photos. The intervalometer also means I don't have to touch my camera while it's getting photos. Once my shot is framed and my settings are locked in, all I have to do is let the camera run while I figure out what my next move is going to be. As the day goes on, it's not unusual for other supercells to fire up in the vicinity. Once my storm looks ragged and beginning to die out, I like to make the plunge towards the next cell in the line, if there is one. As more storms fire up, they'll likely grow upscale into a large line known as a quasi-linear convective system, or a squall line. Cold outflow blasting out from below these giants, colliding with warm inflow, can form dramatic shelf clouds. If you're in front of the storm, these shelf clouds can set up perfect scenes for dramatic storm imagery. Typically at this point in the day, the sun will be starting to fade. If you've managed to stay in front of your storm, now is the perfect opportunity to look back and capture some incredible evening and nighttime lightning with beautiful storm structures. If you're back behind the storm, there's still plenty of awesome stuff to see. As the sun sets, you might be lucky enough to see some beautiful golden hour illuminated mammatus clouds. On top of that, the lightning from back here can be spectacular, as the clear air behind the storm allows for perfect viewing conditions. Well, with all that information, I'd say you're pretty well geared up to go out there and capture some stunning storm images. Hopefully you found all this information helpful, and if you want to see some of the images I've captured throughout my years of storm chasing, then head on over to my darkroom page. I'm adding new photos over there every once in a while, and prints are also available, which directly supports the channel, and that's always greatly appreciated. If you still want to support the channel but you don't want to buy a print, you can always subscribe to this channel. Thank you all for watching, and I can't wait for storm season to heat back up so I can get out there and capture more incredible storm images.